Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar by Phrase. Thank you for tuning in. My name is Clara, and I'm an event specialist here at Phrase, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the introduction to the Phrase translation management system for project managers. Before I go and introduce the speaker for today, I would like to firstly invite you to join us at Slido, which is a platform where we like to collect your feedback. So please, if you can, join us there either by clicking the link that I will just share in the chat with you now. Or you can also scan the QR code on the screen with your mobile phone if that's more convenient. Or you can also open a new tab in your browser, go to slido.com and enter the event code TMS 101. So besides the tab where you can submit questions, you can now see also two poll questions. So if you want to let us know where you are joining us from today, you can. And also what brings you here, whether you are new to Phrase TMS or you've been using it for some time now, but you're maybe looking for a refresher to your knowledge, or maybe you're not a user yet, but you're thinking about it. So let us know. And while you are doing that, let me introduce our speaker for today. It is David McNamee, our enterprise solution architect at Phrase. So hello, David, how are you?
I'm well, Clara. How are you doing today?
All good, excited to do the webinar after some time.
Looking forward to it.
Amazing. Great, so today David is going to give us a tour of Phrase TMS from the perspective of a project manager. He's going to show us how to create a project, how to add and manage other users, and then he'll cover uploading a job, managing your resources, and he's also going to touch on the view of a linguist. So you as a project manager know what the environment looks like for your translators, proofreaders, and other linguists. At the end of the session, we will answer your questions, which you can send into Slido. So please, you can do that throughout the webinar and we'll have a look at them at the end. Last but not least, I want to mention that we are recording this session and we will be distributing it automatically to you tomorrow, so you can rewatch if you need to. Now, without further ado, let's get into it. Over to you, David, and enjoy the webinar, everyone.
All right, thank you, Clara. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining. We appreciate it. If you have questions, please make sure they get into Slido. We'll be saving some time at the end to make sure we go through everything and get you as much information as you need. We're going to assume that if you're here today, you are either brand new to Phrase and want to understand what's happening there. Maybe you've used Phrase before and it's been a while, you're about to start a project, like to remind yourself of what's happening, or you're really trying to avoid a project at work and you thought this would be a good way to do it. So either way, we're going to take a nice tour of the product UX. I'm going to share my screen now. And as I do that, I'm going to stop my video sharing just for the sake of everyone's bandwidth. And away we go. So here is the new and improved Phrase TMS user interface. I'm calling out the TMS specifically because Phrase is a suite of tools. We have the translation management system. You might be familiar with the old MemSource product that's rolled under the new Phrase umbrella. Of course, we have Phrase strings, and we have some other tools that we may touch on as we go through the day around driving quality and insight into the translation process. But let's start with the user interface in Phrase TMS. What's happening, where are things, and why is it there, what's important? Left-hand navigation, pretty straightforward. You'll see your projects, your jobs, other resources that you'll need to manage while you are driving content through your translation and localization process. User management, we're going to touch on this Phrase translate and Phrase analytics piece as we move forward a little bit. And we'll take a look at some other tools around here. Your major project settings, global settings are going to be here behind the settings button. and we will come back and revisit that in just a couple of minutes as we're looking to manage resources for a project. One of the important distinctions in Phrase to understand to really get started quickly is projects and jobs. Everything in Phrase TMS revolves around the concept of a project. And here I have my list of projects that are currently in flight. Some might be completed. I have my due dates. You see I have the different columns. I can click and sort these. I can resize these, make it look the way that I want to. I can add and remove columns. So maybe you don't use the client metadata field, but you do have a cost center applied. You can do that and add those as is necessary. As you're making changes, maybe you're wanting to filter by, say, status. I just want to see what is what's new that needs to be worked on. You can save these as views, so you don't have to see all of the projects all at once. And we can save the changes there. Made a change. Maybe I don't want to have that work. We can duplicate that. We can clear these settings and start back to 0. Your projects are going to have your core information about who's working on a project, what are those steps that the workflow is going to follow, what other resources are involved in the project, as well as the content itself. So if I look into just one of these that I already have started and have some content for, I'll see my target languages. I'll see my progress on the dashboard. I can collapse that, get that out of the way, so I have a little more view. And I have the content that is making up the project. And the content is contained in a job. And that was the other key piece, projects and jobs. So remember, a job is contained within a project. And there's a reason why we break that out here in the user interface. Your linguists are more often than not just going to see jobs. That's the reason. If I come over here and I click through, I can see just a list of jobs. I'll see the content, I'll see to whom it's been assigned, and can very quickly work with individual pieces of content. So maybe I want to come here and do my assignments, add due dates, very quick, very efficient. If I want to see the overarching project structure, I can come over, go into projects, and click through. So it's just a question of where do you want to focus your attention? What level of data do you need to see at any given time? Other things that are set at a project level will be able to run analyses of content. These will be things that give us reporting of what are the word volumes, the word counts, net word counts, matches to translation memory, machine translation effectiveness. We'll talk a little bit about that as we go on. If I have rate cards for providers, we're going to talk about vendors here in a minute too, we can run quotes and do all that at the project level. And if I have other resources like translation memories or term bases, those will be available to me at a project level. Let's actually go in and get ready to create a new project. And I say get ready to create a new project because if you've worked on a localization project, you know there are some moving pieces that you have to line up in advance. So let's start with our users. We want to have users to come in and do the work. And it's very straightforward to create a new user in Phrase. Come over to users. There's a nice little plus arrow that's a shortcut, so we don't even have to click all the way over here, but we can say new. It'll give us our metrics for existing users, what we have left on our current account, name, last name, email, and then we can assign them a role. The official documentation goes into some depth about what these different roles can and cannot do. But essentially, a linguist is going to have just the jobs available to them, so they can go in, they can do translation work, they can do review work, they can do LQA work if you're doing linguistic quality assessment as part of your project. Project managers are going to be able to create new projects and assign resources, assign tasks to people, and admins can do pretty much everything. We also have a guest role and a submitter role. And the submitter role can be interesting because we need to talk about how do you actually get content into the translation management system to begin with. There's a number of ways: manual intervention, product integration with content management systems, but we can also give people access to a submitter portal. We'll pop into one of those here shortly to give them a self-service way to provide content. What rights will your user have? You make that decision. If they can work in the TMs and TBs as editors, can they use machine translation? It's one of our biggest topics in the industry, right? Machine translation. Are we going to use it? Not use it? At a user level, you can dictate whether they will even have it as an option. Opt in for newsletters, and then your rate plans. So these are your discount plans and your price lists. So you may have some price lists from different vendors. You might have internal chargeback values that you need to keep track of. But then the relevancy section gets a little interesting in that you can tag users with languages, source languages, target languages, domains, the other parts of the metadata schema that might be interesting to identify which resource is a good idea to be using on a particular project. So we can have some suggestions on down the line, and also tag which workflow step might be most appropriate for this particular user. You don't have to know all this in advance. You don't have to fill all this out in advance to use a user, but it can be very helpful as we move along a little bit. If we look at one that's already been created, let's take a look at Tony here. I can go in, see the metadata for this person. I can also see a summary of the jobs that this person is tied to and the relevancy data. So really easy to set up a user. Once you create that user, you've got to have a valid email because they will get an email notification to go ahead and sign in, set their password up, and get access to their projects and jobs. Next resource that we usually think about when we're setting up a project is translation memories. One of the key benefits of using a translation management system is that we can automatically apply assets for reuse during the process. Translation memory is one of the biggest areas that we get consistency in translation, improvement in turnaround time, and some cost savings. So we can work with existing translation memories. I'm going to click through one here just to see what it looks like. Okay, so we have our target languages. Your translation memory strategy is going to be important long term. We definitely don't have enough time to really dig into it during this call. It's not the focus, but thinking about, do I want to have a translation memory per target language, per domain concept, business unit? Do I want to have a working memory that I then have to manually approve and merge into another TM that's broadly available? We can work with multiple translation memories in a project. We'll see that set up here in just a minute. So all that goes into creating a TM. I can import existing ones. So if you have a TMX file, even if it's an Excel workbook, we can take that and pull it in. We can see which projects this translation memory is currently associated with, and I can search through and look for existing entries. Let's see, do I have, oh no, I don't. I usually have something around chocolate, but coffee, yep, always count on coffee being there. So I can see the existing entries. So if I need to come in, make some changes to a translation, I can just click in and start to type away and make those changes. I'm not going to make a change here because you don't want to watch me type. That'd be bad. We can add entries from here manually, but most of the time your entries are going to come through the workflow process itself. Okay. Next, we want to talk about term bases, and it looks a lot like a translation memory. Now, translation memories, the way that these work, if you're not that familiar yet, let me actually go back here. Coffee, right? Yeah, definitely coffee. Translation memories do matching on a segment. Now, segments usually line up to a sentence in English and Latin and Germanic languages. It can vary a little bit outside of that, but more or less you can think about it as a sentence and be okay in life. You submit a piece of content, the translation memory, after the content has been parsed, is going to do a search. Is this sentence here? Yes. Is this segment here? Yes. If it's there, then we can take the translation, apply it to the target, reuse it. That's how we get those benefits. So it works at a segment level. There's some advanced things that we can talk about, really getting into the mechanics of it, but just keep in mind it's working at a segment level. The difference between a translation memory and a term base is that a term base is at an individual word or a phrase. And so translation memories, again, we're looking at a segment. So it's a longer piece of text. A term is going to be a word or a couple of words that makes a phrase. Think your proper nouns. And what you really want to have mostly in your term bases are things that are unique to your industry or your particular organization, right? Brand names, particular ways of phrasing a word that you want to see that you can add into the term base. And the term base will get applied after the translation, the pre-translation happens. So as your linguists are working on the content, we'll be able to look at that content, flag to see if a term has been used appropriately. If it's missing, we can flag it and make sure you get that consistency and quality. So it's about that scope and making sure that you're using specific words correctly in your term base, as opposed to reusing a previously created full segment translation. These are two major assets that we're going to have when we're putting a project together. Third major asset that we want to have identified before we start a project is machine translation. Are we going to use it? Are we not going to use it? Okay. If we're going to use it, we have multiple options inside of Phrase TMS. A traditional option is individual machine translation integration. So I can come back into settings and I will look for my integrations, and there are my machine translation engines. And you'll see I already have one set up. I've got a Microsoft Translator instance that I've set up, and I can now use this in translations at the places where I say it's okay to use it. I can also create a new connection, and you'll see we have a pretty extensive list of machine translation engines with which we integrate. I'm not going to get into strategy vision right now, but there's more machine translation engines and tools that we'll be allowing integration with. And of course, if you have one that you'd like to see, call it out and we'll take a look at it. Individual machine translation, everybody understands it. We've been doing this for a while in the industry. We'll look at where in the project settings you can then use this. The other option you have with machine translation engines is Phrase Translate. Now, Phrase Translate is something that you can add to your TMS subscription, and it's a machine translation aggregator. Okay, so typically you have to use an individual machine translation engine. You want to use Microsoft Translator, you go to Microsoft, sign a contract, pay them money. They give you a license key for Azure Microsoft Translator. You go to Google, you want to use Google Translate, you go sign a contract, pay them money, they give you a license key for et cetera, right? You have to do that for every machine translation engine that you want to use. And you also have to do the research, be aware of which machine translation engine is good for which language pair, what topic. It's a lot of work. With Phrase Translate, as a machine translation aggregator, we are doing all of that work for you. So you don't have to have separate licensing agreements with those providers. We have them as part of a managed cohort. And you can have different profiles to include different machine translation engines. So for example, I have DeepL and Microsoft Translator, Rosetta. If I want to add Google into the mix, Systran, we have Alexa, great. I put in my credentials there. I can go away with that because there's some custom work involved there. I can turn on Google Translate. Okay, so I can add these different things to my cohort. Don't have to do that extra management. And what happens when I use Phrase Translate as part of my workflow, the Phrase Translate tool will automatically pick which machine translation engine is most appropriate for the content that I'm submitting, as well as the language pairs that are involved. Okay. We know quarterly things can change, actually monthly things can change. And we publish a report every quarter with a lot of our research data, what our AI team and our linguists are working on behind the scenes, and saying that, yes, for this language pair, DeepL is great on this domain. Microsoft Translator is tops in a different language pair for a different domain. And all those things change constantly. So we're keeping that pace for you, so you don't have to make that investment in doing that analysis and having all that yourself. So that's two options for machine translation. A third option that is available to you only inside of Phrase Translate is our own bespoke MT engine. We're doing some very specific things with a specific subset of languages. And it's interesting because we're the TMS, we can improve the context and include things from translation memory and term base and previous and next segments, those sorts of things, and get better results under certain circumstances. So all that is to say, machine translation, it's a big topic. We'll definitely be talking about it more in the future, not today, but this is a key resource for you to have before you go in and get started with a project. All right, so we have resources, we have users. One thing I don't have yet that I might want to have before I start a project, we're almost there, we're really close to actually creating a project, is a vendor. Am I going to use external resources to make this project happen? So under settings, administration, I have vendors, and I already have a couple that have been added. If I take a look at one of these, I'll see which jobs I have them being a part of, see some basic information, who is the owner, time zones, so I'm aware, and the relevance that I have previously set. Looks very much like a user set of relevant information. That's really important to keep in mind too. So we can add vendors very quickly. Just need to have their vendor key, vendor token, sorry. And once they give that to you, type that in there, and we'll be able to pull them in and fill in the rest of this information. All right, translation memories, term bases, users, vendors, machine translation strategy. Off we go. Let's actually take a look here and create a project. Okay. Now I'm going to do this manually. There's lots of options for automating this. We can use a template, and you can see I've got a list here of templates that I have previously created that will pre-populate a lot of this information. We might come back to that here in a second, but let's look at the options here. Client, domain, subdomain. If I have other custom fields that I want to include in this, I can. Source language, we do assume a single source language. Okay? So pick that with care, because that will drive you into multiple projects if you have multiple source languages. But we can manage multiple target languages in a project. So if you have UK English and you want to drive that into French and Spain continental versions and a few other things, great, we can do that all here. Your due date for the project, for the overarching project, and other metadata. So we'll see here our options for, hey, right off the bat, machine translation engine. What do we want to have? Okay. What do we want to see for pre-translation? Lots of options here in pre-translation. This is worth explaining a bit. In the processing pipeline, if you will, think about it as a pipeline. You submit a piece of content, the translation management system starts to do work to it as soon as you upload it. It starts to break things into segments. It starts to look for particular issues. And if you allow it, it can start to do what we call pre-translation. It's really a name that covers two things, translation memory and machine translation. Right? During pre-translation, you can say, I want to have the TMS look at my translation memory, any translation memories that I have associated with this project, and follow a set of rules to pull forward previously created translations. Those rules are set here. What are our thresholds for matching? Matching, we can have lots of discussions and arguments about matching, and industry people have whole conferences about it, right? Basically, we're saying there's a statistical percentage match when you compare segments. Is this 100% match to all the words? So that means every word in the segment matches a segment we have stored in translation memory. A 70% match. So out of a 10-word segment, 3 words don't match. Is that still okay for us to use as maybe a starting place for the translator, so they're not looking at a blank slate? Okay? You'll make those decisions here in your translation memory rules under pre-translation. There are other decisions to make beyond that. Are they going to be allowed to deal with non-translatables? So things like are standing on their own, like it's a percentage sign or it's a symbol. Do you want that to be pre-translated? Do you want translators, professional translators, to be able to handle that? Do we want to use machine translation at all during pre-translate? So those are 2 big decisions. Are you going to use translation memory? Well, probably. Machine translation, it's 2023. It's a good chance you're going to use it. So what are those rules that come into play? When we find a match, either through machine translation or looking in translation memories for previously approved translations, do we reuse them within the document? So if I have repetitive text, the same sentence 2 or 3 times inside of a document, I'm going to just automatically reuse that, and we can say propagate, reuse the same result. And then when I have results, do we want to lock anything? And lock, it's a little further down here. Lock just means a translator doesn't have a need by our rules to touch this segment, and maybe we want to prevent them from being able to make those changes. Locks a lot of times are used for productivity. So if we say this document had 20 segments and 15 of them came out of translation memory because we've run this document before, I don't want the translator to touch anything except those 5 new segments. We can start locking things, and we can lock that based off of the match rate. 101 matches, it just means that there's some additional context inside the translation memory that we're looking at. to say not only do the words match, but the segment before matches or the segment after matches, or there's a piece of metadata on the segment that matches what you've just submitted. There's an extra layer there. So we can say, yeah, let's go ahead and do that. Let's lock these things down. Machine translation matches. Do we trust our machine translation engines enough to say, yeah, let's go ahead and lock it when they come back with 100% match? Quality assurance, we can spend days, right, going into each of these different details. A couple things that are really important for us to look at in QA checks. Are we, dealing with matches the way that we expect? Terminology. Are we going to allow a forbidden terms list? Formatting can be really, really important. Those of you who are pulling content out of less popular, we'll say, I should say less popular, less frequently adopted systems, or systems that have been homegrown, may have some differences in formatting when you extract text. So we need to make sure that those are dealt with in an appropriate way. And then if you have a custom check, you can throw in some regular expressions here. And that's definitely another topic for another day. Okay, access and security. Who's allowed to do what? Can editors, download? Can they share jobs? Can vendors share jobs? We'll let you dig into this, and I think it's a great idea that if you are new, just set aside some time and understand that you are going to need to walk through all these things and spend some quality time reviewing them. The workflow is probably the last major piece of important section that I'm going to look at, because this tells me what steps are there. If I don't choose any of this, then we just have what? Pre-translation, and that's it. It might be an okay use case, but mostly I'm going to want to say, yeah, we want to do translation. I want to do a revision. Maybe I want to have a quality assessment step, and then I'll use an LQA profile. LQA profiles, I don't think we're going to have enough time to really dig into them, but they will let you set up a set of conditions and rules to say there are these kinds of errors, and they have a score. And if a human reviewer finds them, then that decreases the quality score. And if your quality score falls low enough, then bad things happen, and we don't want that piece of content into production. Okay, so that's that. So there's all these different options here. I'm going to quickly choose a template because I'm going to show you a couple of advanced things that happen. So you see it all pre-populated out of the template. Any project that you create, after you configure it, you can save it as a template. Got all the metadata there. And I want to show you two things. One, on the machine translation engine, we can have the option to deal with this per target language. So if I have my own strategy for dealing with machine translation engines, maybe I want to say, yeah, for here, for Haitian Creole, I really, really like Microsoft Translate for whatever reason. Great, we can do that. So we can have that level of sophistication. Also on the workflows, when we look at the jobs, we can pre-populate the assignments. So let's go ahead and hit create. Give that a second. We're going to upload a piece of content here in a second. You see there's a couple of steps that I have in here. If I edit the project, scroll back down. Ooh, I picked one that I didn't pre-create. Segments. Okay, so let's just add a job here, and I'll show you what I'm talking about manually. Let me start a new job. Now, if I do it manually, oh, there it is. I'm sorry. When I add the job, you can see it's pre-populated based off of my template rules, who the vendors are that are going to work on different content. So I can have that control, just like I showed a minute ago with machine translation. Human translation, same thing. We can specify who is going to work on a particular language pair for a job. Let's pick just a Word doc. Let's just do some weird things here. JSON file and Word docs, good times. My quality assessment looks just like previous. I can control file import settings. So I want to go in and just like we saw a minute ago, maybe I have a regular expression to manage tags and settings. Maybe I want to control characters that are ignored, tags that are ignored. And okay, great. So I've added my content to my project, and now it's spun that off into a whole bunch of different jobs because I've got a whole bunch of different languages that are under this particular project. So you can see it's really going crazy. Now, as a project manager, I can come in here, take a look, see who's missing a provider, do those assignments. I can do analysis to see what my translation memory hits were, any of those metrics that I want to manage up front. My vendors, my translators, they're going to see a couple of different things. So if I switch over now to people who have been assigned work through this template, I'm going to move away from my account and I'm going to hit, let's see. Yeah, okay, we've got a couple there for this guy. Come over and look at the project list for one of my vendors. Okay, there we are. There's the project list that I have. I also have jobs that have been assigned to me. Let's take a look at everything that's been assigned to my group. There we go. So it's been assigned to me, my vendor. I'm a vendor manager, so I can now come in and start assigning specific people on my side. And you don't have to spend time worrying about that. And as a translator, I can just come in and click through to one of these. Let's just take a look at this file, very, very basic. There we go. Okay, as a translator, this is a JSON file, so I'm going to see some pre-translated elements here because my rules do include machine translation, so I can accept this job. Great, and I can decide, all right, is this acceptable? I can look over here on the right and see where this translation came from. It's actually coming from a translation memory. Believe it or not, I've got welcome already in my translation memory, so we're reusing that. Okay, move there, great. This one, this is kind of a weird one. So this is using phrase translate. This is totally a misspelling. This is a bad word here. What I actually wanted was copyright. So derechos de autor and my company name. So I can actually make those changes. And let's go through and say, yep, that's confirmed. That's confirmed. These segments are confirmed. So now we're done. Hit complete. I go back to my project and we'll be able to see status. Different kinds of documents will have an opportunity for preview. In this case, it's a JSON file. It's not that terribly interesting. But if I switch back to my main account here, where I'm in the TMS, as a project manager, I can jump into any document and see how things are progressing. This is power, right? You'd be responsible with it. If I am actually working on a translation, you do need to accept the translation job before you can start editing. And in this case, I am doing a Word document. Full credit, this is text that I stole from the New York Times and put into a Word document, but you can see that as I move through, I see what the translation will look like in context. And as I click around the document, we'll see that, yeah, this is the highlighted segment and can move right along. And similarly, you see that over here on the right, where is my translation coming from? Down here, it says, yep, that's my MS translator that I set up a minute ago. So we're using that. Lots of other options here in the translation editor for translator productivity, being able to make comments and call out specific people. So maybe I want to have Paige. Let's see. Oh, she's not on this project. Erin is. Can you review this? It looks odd. Conversation history, translation history, LQA score, that all stays with the segment. You don't have to leave the tool. The person that I tagged will get a notification so they can come in here and see what the comment is and respond appropriately. Okay. Don't have to use Slack all the time. Don't have to use email all the time. You can stay inside the tool to drive that level of communication. So we've got project, we've got translators working on projects. We need to see how things are progressing overall in our translation strategy. So I'm going to take a look at analytics, move away from the project space and say, all right, how are things going? There's a number of common questions that people want to have answers to. How many words are being pushed through the system? What are those being broken down by in language pair? Who's pushing them through? Who's working on them? What projects are really driving the content? And then some of the metadata that we see people use more often is also very important. So out of the box, you get some nice dashboarding across a variety of different topics. So volume, time, turnaround time is something that people are very, very concerned about. That's one of the key objectives most of the time is we want to have faster turnaround time. So as a project manager, I can look at the portfolio, see how we're doing across projects, across language pairs. Quality scoring, similarly, for using LQA, what kind of quality are we getting? If we're not closer to green or in green, we've got some work to do with our translators, maybe with the source content. Quotes, cost, savings, leverage, all of these go to improving cost across time. So if I look at where translations are coming from leverage, great. Machine translation, translation memory leading the way. That's usually what we like to see with long-term projects. See where the translations are coming from across different languages. So we're having to rely on machine translation for a bit there. These are static dashboards, again, based off of the most common questions that we get and support sees. If you want to create your own sort of dashboards and ask your own sorts of questions, there is an add-on for the TMS called Advanced Analytics. And you can then go in and do your own interesting things and create your own dashboards the way that you like to work. I created my own exceptions dashboard because I like to manage by exception. We get all this automation in play. Really just want to focus on the things that are going not perfectly. So right now I can see I've got 49 unassigned jobs. I probably need to get on that in a hurry. and we can add some other metrics here as well and click through. So we have gone through, we've looked at the resources that you have to gather before you start a project. We've talked about creating a project. We've pushed some content in manually. We've seen that in flight. We've seen a translator working on it after the project. We've seen manually, or I'm sorry, we've seen the analytics that we want to see to help manage things along. Let's look at one more thing here, and ask the question of how do you get content in to the TMS in the first place. Now you saw me as a project manager go in and manually upload some files, and that's okay because I'm a project manager and I have access to all that stuff. Technical term, we'll call it stuff. In reality, that's not going to be the case. You want more people putting in content than you have project managers. So you'll either have a prepackaged integration with a content management system like Drupal or Contentful, Salesforce Knowledge, a number of those different kind of systems, code repositories, GitHub, we can connect to that. Maybe the development team has done some things and they're using our API to integrate, or you just want to give people the opportunity to do it themselves. And you can create a submitter portal inside the TMS. This is a quick configuration job to be able to give someone a screen that looks like this and say, yep, I'm going to give you the document and I want it translated in Spanish. And there we go. Let me load up that file, and it will do some analysis here. Okay, we've got those numbers. So all the things that we saw in project settings around rate schemes and rate charts and pre-translation, that all applies and ties in here. I'm not going to go through the steps of validating my email address just because we're starting to get low on time. But once it's validated, I click submit, and then we have a nice way for people to push that content to us. As things progress through the pipeline, they'll get notifications. When it's done, they'll get a notification. They can come here and download their content. So one more fun trick in the project management toolbox to let people get to their content. We have about 10 minutes left in our scheduled time. So I'm going to go ahead and take a pause here, and I'm going to go back to Clara and see what we have inbound as far as any questions or anything that people want to address further.
Thank you very much, David, for the demo. It was excellent. Before we go into the questions, let me just quickly invite everybody to our next upcoming webinars. If you're interested, tomorrow at the same time as this, we are doing an introduction to phrase strings. So if you're interested in a software localization platform on top of the TMS, come check it out. And in 2 weeks, we are doing a session where we will be looking at the recent release of innovations. Especially, we will be looking at the enhancements that we've done to the phrase suite. Phrase suite is the unified suite where you can leverage both phrase TMS and phrase strings. So check this all out. You can register at phrase.com/resources/webinars. I will paste the link for you in the chat as well. There you go. And now I will go over to the questions. And actually, I appreciate that there are way more questions that we have time for.
It's always I always love that, because that's either that means we've got a really engaged audience, or I'm a horrible presenter and no one understands what's happening and we have to have a lot of questions. So
I'm sure it's option A, really engaged audience. So let's start with the first one.
Estimate for certification courses. So
maybe
yes.
I can address that one. Maybe
Sure.
I have more insights in the project than you do, David. We are definitely working towards this year to release the new certification program. We have started a revamp after the big rebrand to the Phrase brand, and we are working on a thorough certification program. So this year is the timeline for sure, and I can also drop a link in the chat where you can sign up for updates on the certifications.
And my team is actually a part of that effort. So
Okay.
there's a lot of attention to this. So we want to say sooner rather than later, but if I give you an actual timeline, Lydia will get on a plane and beat me, and we're going to wait. So it's coming. We're going to get that out for you. I've been beta testing it myself, and yeah, it's coming. It's coming.
Okay, excellent. I didn't know you were involved personally, so that's great to hear from you. Right, next question. Thank you for hosting this webinar. Is there any possible way of bridging term bases between two accounts for the same organization? If this isn't possible, how do you export TB from one account and import to another account, please?
Bridging, if you're a vendor, your client can share the resource, and that will come over as part of the project sharing. If not, then no, two completely disjointed, unrelated accounts. You want to do an export. The steps for export are in the documentation, but if you go to term base, there's a big shiny export button to push that out. We can talk more about that offline or in the support channels. Integrations with other tools like Plunet. Yeah, there's a lot. We have some first party ones, like our integration with content management systems like Drupal and Contentful. Others, Plunet, XTRF, Content Hub is one of my favorites. Those folks have done great work to integrate us into their tools because we give them a lot of value. So there's a list of ones that we've created. It's on our integrations page on the website. Other ones, we'll need to know more specifically which ones you're interested, because we didn't create them all. So we can maybe give a little bit of info, but more often than not, like with Plunet, they own that integration, they built it, they maintain it, and it works from what I hear. Would love to work with them more on making it fit your needs. Let's see, that's a long one. Fix phrase their optimized path to avoid this issue, or assure the grammar check is performed. So grammar check runs as part of QA, so that will hit automatically at the end. You can also do a manual QA. I think there are maybe two questions lurking beneath this question, Isabella. Is the grammar check happening, and is the grammar check sufficient for your needs? Because if you're doing something like pulling the bilingual file into Microsoft Word, it might just be that we're configured wrong. But if you are pulling it down into something like Xbench and doing some of that, high-powered work that they do in Xbench, then maybe it's just a reality that we need to do that. So we'd have to dig deeper to I think provide more value to that question. I'm sorry, Isabella. Can I see how other linguists translated a string for inspiration? So there is a concordance search in the translation editor. So you can do a search and search across resources that are accessible to you. So that might be just what's in translation memory, or across projects depending on your permissions. So obviously you're not going to be able to search across a project you don't have access to. So it's all about scoping permissions at that point. So I'm interested in the for inspiration part of that. I would love to talk more about that at some other point. Iva, submitter portal. I think disadvantages of the public link. The disadvantages of the public link is that it's public. If it's a scenario where you're okay risking anybody, dropping a link onto Reddit and everybody dropping files into your submitter portal, be my guest, you're going to not like the bill that comes after that gets processed. So it really just comes down to risk management for you. If you don't care that anybody can put content into your project, then okay. But usually we want to have some restrictions to say, yep, these are people who are authorized to work on this, because every time you put a piece of content into the TMS, somebody is gonna have to pay for it. Let's see, can we assign rates to each linguist and the project job quotes based on that? No, that would be a great use case for Plunet or XTRF and that integration. We are worried about linguists as a valuable resource to the project, but we're not a marketplace. So you're going to either assign people who are part of your staff, or have some kind of vendor arrangement, and they'll take responsibility for doing the assignment. Documentation, meaning and functionality behind each option in the project create window. Yes, phrase.com, go to resources, and in the help center, you will see the documentation for all of it. If you feel like something is missing, please use the tools on the page to flag it, and our crack team of content creators will get right on that. We may make a specialized seminar on API connection. Would love to. I'm going to defer that to the team that Clara is on to tie one of our developers down and make them sit in a room and do that session. That would be awesome.
Yes, thank you for the suggestion. It is not planned at the moment, but we can look into it.
Anna, if you don't, do they not get an email? They don't receive an external ping right now. It is just a flag in Phrase in the notification center. If you haven't seen the notification center, that was released in our last cadence earlier this year. So that is maybe something we should look at if we have enough feedback from the community that is helpful. But for now, it is, and again, last I saw, it is just in the notification center. And lastly, working with projects, different source files per language. Is there a way to set all target languages at the same time with different source files? Ooh, Grace, you got a good one there. Different source files per language. So I'm not sure I 100% follow. It looks like you're uploading multiple files per language. Is there a way to set all target languages at the same time with different source files? One by one. Part of it will depend on how those source files are getting into the TMS. So if I'm guessing right, you might have a project where different source files per language. So you've got maybe 5 languages in Czech and 5 languages in Spanish, or that are targeting for Czech, targeting for Spanish. You can upload those 5 at a time and target all 5 for Czech, and then do another batch of 5 and target them for Spanish. I think creatively looking at how you're uploading and getting them into the TMS is going to be helpful, but also possibly me understanding the question better will be helpful for that too. So I'm sorry if I can't give you a perfect answer at this point, but we certainly can submit content and do some mass targeting of files for a language. So hopefully we can get that ironed out. So thank you for submitting the question, though, and please feel free to use our other support channels to submit that question, and we'll get you some help.
Thank you. Thank you, David. We have just run out of time. We are perfectly on time. So thank you very much again for the presentation and for answering all of the questions. And to our audience, if you have some suggestions on some future webinars or you want to leave feedback, there will be a short survey popping up after we close this session. So we'll be grateful for your feedback. Let us know what you thought and hopefully see you some other time at another webinar. Thank you very much and have a good day.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Clara.